We'll get started in just a second, dialing into our room.
Okay.
All right, it is 2:01. So why don't we get started? Hey everyone, my name is Doug Haber. I'm a software development manager here at Audible. Welcome to our Tech House speaker series. Why don't I turn it over to Darren? Maybe you could say a few words welcoming everybody, and then
Yeah, thank you so much.
yeah.
I want to first thank Audible for our tremendous collaboration together. We started maybe close to a year ago, if not exactly that. And everything that we asked to kind of build out the tech house, which would allow us to offer a number of capabilities. Audible was very gracious to building a website, to starting this, Tech Talk series, learning series, where I'm very grateful. We're grateful to all the folks that have joined us today. And I think both the Urban League of Essex County's Tech House and Audible, our goal is to increase the viewership substantially as we enter a very exciting 2024. And so welcome to all the viewers. And if you like, which I'm sure you will, the tech talk that you're going to be treated to today, please share that with your friends, family, and colleagues. I did find out that you could download, and you guys are going to talk about this more, a free version of Tableau. So I was excited, trying to figure out how to download mine so we could leverage it and use it with the business. So I will turn it over to put it in the very capable hands of the exceptional Audible team.
Awesome. Thank you very much, and thank you for that great intro. So just as a heads up to everyone, this is our monthly series where we talk about a wide variety of topics with a no assumed technical experience. And so it could be anything ranging from Excel productivity tips to Tableau to what is a technical project manager and anything in between. So where the goal is to try to bring more technical knowledge to the community and to anyone that is interested. Today's topic will be by Ken Walker, who is a senior director of customer analytics at Audible. We'll be talking about data science and Tableau. That's a specific tool that can be used for that. We also have our next series coming up later this month on the 26th, where Beth Zellin and Paul Dobeck will be talking about technical program management, which should be super interesting as well. And we have additional topics every month. If you have any questions, feel free to post them into the Slack. We also have a Slido, and we'll take some time at the end to address any of those questions. And the only cost of admission is a brief survey at the end, where we'd love to hear your feedback and any suggestions that you have. But with all of that intro, I'd like to turn it over to Ken to walk us through data science and Tableau.
Super. Thank you, Darren. Thank you, Doug, for the introductions. Let's do the requisite AV harrowing moment where I plug in my laptop and we see if this all actually works. So bear with me a second here. What should pop up on our screen? Hey, look at that. Is my actual PowerPoint presentation. So yeah, as we get started, and if you're so inclined, I love emoji. It's kind of like one of my second languages that I've been developing the last couple of years. This guy on the screen happens to be my favorite to represent myself. Feel free to drop in the Chime chat an emoji that you feel like best represents yourself, just so we can get to know each other a little bit. But we'll do a couple things over the course of our time together here. So the goal really for this conversation is to convey some essential knowledge about Tableau. Tableau is a data visualization tool that we use here at Audible and is in wide use at Amazon as well. So we'll do a couple things. I'll just share a little bit about myself and my journey here at Audible, as well as journey in Newark as well. I've got some history with the city. Share a little bit of an overview of sort of like where does Tableau fit in the marketplace of data visualization tools and capabilities, and then we'll get into an actual lab of how to actually use the tool for a window of time, and wrap up with Q&A. This call is being recorded, so I'd invite you to maybe not try to follow along if you've got Tableau downloaded locally and you're trying to sort of follow along. Don't feel the pressure of trying to kind of mimic the same activity on screen as I'm doing. Feel free to kind of relax, sit back a little bit. I'll take you through some essentials of the tool. And feel free to absolutely jump in with questions. You can drop them in chime if maybe Doug and Autumn, you don't mind, like, letting me know if there's conversation there. And we can play Stump the Data Analyst with the questions that you might have about the tool. So let's get into it. And let me see if I can actually even go crazy here and do presentation format. All right, so a little bit about me. So I've been leading an analytics team here at Audible for about half of my 10-year tenure at Audible. One of my kind of favorite activities about this job is it does involve storytelling with data. So developing learnings that are sourced from customer behavior is something that I came to get really excited about as part of my career. I have 4 children, which is also noted here on the slide. And when I joined the company back in 2013, at least a couple of them were going to bed with audiobooks every night. And so as an analyst, I was actually one of the first people to be able to explore listening data, which we have for our customers. And the reason for that was because I was part of launching the pilot of Tableau for Audible overall. And because I was kind of like right place, right time, I was able to explore customer listening behavior and found that indeed there's a cohort of customers whose behavior skews towards tablets rather than mobile, and towards kids genre content rather than sort of business nonfiction, fantasy, mystery thriller, those kinds of things around bedtime as well. And I was like, hey, there's a cohort of customers that looks exactly like me. I was able to kind of understand myself through the data too, which was very cool. I do have a computer science background from down the street here at Rutgers, Newark, just down University Ave. And I referring to myself as an adopted Newarker here, having lived, studied, or worked in Newark for nearly 25 years now. Here's my family. I mentioned them before. We just got back from a trip from visiting the Grand Canyon, which holds up to the name, so I certainly recommend it. Along my career journey, I've thought of myself of moving kind of rightward on the quantitative spectrum here. When I did undergrad at Rutgers, I expected to be a business analyst. So I was at Dun & Bradstreet at the time. I was a customer service analyst and moved into being a front-end engineer with web development and a systems analyst later on after that. Spent some time at Citi examining different aspects of the risk side of the business, and then finally landed here at Audible and the financial planning and analysis team before leading an analytics team. So definitely on the left side of the spectrum, less quantitative, and on the right side of the spectrum, more quantitative. I'm using tools like we'll talk about today to examine a large quantity of customer behavioral data. Millions and millions of customers in our record sets, billions and billions of listening occasions. When it comes to thinking about how to process that information, how to tell stories with it. I mentioned I've got some history with Newark as well. So looking from 2000 to 2024, where we are today, I've studied computer science at Rutgers, Newark, and lived here in the Ironbound with my family for about 12 years. During that window of time, I started a blog called The Daily Newarker and got to meet luminaries in the mayor's office when Cory Booker was mayor. So I got to know like Desiree Peterson Bell and Mo Butler. Had lunch with him. So some Newark connections there through the blog. And then finally, once we had our 4th child, I was like, we gotta find a place for the backyard. So we're in Bloomfield today. So let's move into some data science fundamentals. Why are we leveraging Tableau to understand our customers? So just a quick thought to consider. What is data science? Data science can describe a lot of things. We've got colleagues here who are machine learning engineers. We've got colleagues here who are doing experimentation with multivariate record sets. You'll see from me today some descriptive statistics. Really, if you think about data science as sort of like a broad area of focus, it's the pursuit of applying the scientific method to data to understand, in our case, what customers really want. In terms of how we think of individuals as data scientists, like there's a lot of skills that could come into play: understanding of statistics, writing code, being able to communicate effectively, manage projects, understanding sort of the user experience of data, and understanding how that plugs into strategy. Today, we'll focus on these two rings of statistics and communication that have more to do with data visualization tools. There's a lot of tools that we could use here at Audible to understand customers, but the focus again today will be in the data visualization space. The one key thing that analysts are trying to attempt at Audible is to help us all to leverage these tools to learn about our customers. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that today. Just to situate Tableau in the panoply of data visualization tools, I've got a handful of examples here that are relatively prominent now. Microsoft Power BI, which I know the last presentation was on Excel, which plugs very closely into Excel with the Microsoft data engineering stack. There's Amazon QuickSight, which is a tool that Amazon makes available through Amazon Web Services. There's Tableau, and then on the right-hand side of the slide is a little more data visualization and analysis capabilities if you're more code inclined. So using the Matplotlib library with Python, or using D3 if you're familiar with JavaScript, or ggplot or ggstatplot for R. And we'll focus more on Tableau today, partly because the tool provides what I like to refer to as flow for when you're doing an analysis, and you'll see what I mean in just a minute. Where can you find Tableau? So there is a public available version of Tableau that Darren had hinted at the top of our presentation today. You can find it at public.tableau.com. If you're curious to learn more about Tableau, there's an upcoming conference. I believe it's, I don't have the dates in here, I believe it's the very end of April. And you can find more information about that here. There is an in-person cost for attending the Tableau conference, but all of the presentations are made available online for free, and that's something that we at Audible have taken a couple of days as colleagues to watch together. And I invite you to do the same thing too if you're curious to learn more. In terms of data sets to play with, there's data all over the place. Data is plural is one of my favorite resources to find data sets that are particularly interesting, that cover a wide variety of different disciplines. So if you're curious about COVID, or if you're curious about traffic lights, or if you're curious about Netflix has a publicly available data set for understanding what customers are watching. This Data is Plural newsletter, which comes out, I think it's twice a month, offers these kinds of data sets to be able to play around with in different formats. So we'll get into one that I happen to have available to me now from a recent analysis that I had to do. So before we get into the data visualization lab, and I'll switch over to Tableau itself and talk about the tool and the particular study that I had attempted back in 2018 and want to share with you all. Are there any thoughts, questions, ideas, chat that we might want to invite before diving in?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat or in the sliders, so go for it.
Okay, cool. All right, y'all are a patient audience. Thank you. Okay, great. So as I mentioned before, the actual kind of steps of going through leveraging data in the tool can be a little tricky to try to replicate in real time. So again, I'll invite us all to remember that this call is being recorded, and you can always refer back to it on Tech House's website. So just to kind of orient us to the tool here, this is Tableau. When you open Tableau for the first time, what it'll do is invite you to add a data set to the tool, which I've got available here on screen. So I've preloaded my data set, and I'll talk about what it is in just a minute. But you can see here along the right-hand side of the screen, we've got the columns of the data that we're going to explore in just a little bit. This pane up here is where we drag and drop data into to be able to access with the tool. And I've got a simple flat file for us to begin to explore. In this analysis tab, you can see on the left-hand side, there are different columns available that are in the data set. So if you're familiar with Excel, these are sort of columns from A to double Z and beyond that are available, and each of them has a name. They're split into two different types of data, one of which is what is referred to as a dimension. So it's the thing you generally want to examine the data through, like a lens. And the other are facts, which are metrics that you want to calculate. And so each of these has like a different data type as they're referred to. So some are strings of text, some are calendar dates, which I don't have in this particular data set. Some are just numbers that you can see here. And it's a little hard to see on the screen, I think, unless I change my resolution. But some of these are even calculated fields that I'll demonstrate in a little bit. So if you're trying to figure out one aspect of the data that you would apply a formula to in Excel, Tableau works very similarly. Here in the broader visualization view of the tool is where we're going to drag and drop fields to try to get an illustration of what's going on in our data in just a little bit. And so some key things to see here, and you'll see me go through them as we go. There's a filters box for if I want to like only select a certain kind of data. I can drag a field into the filters view. I'll give an example of that here. Or if I drag location into here, you can see there are different options made available to me on things I might want to filter in or out of my data. There's the marks cards, as the Tableau company refers to it, which will let me add color to my data set or change the size of how something is visualized and add text labels and so on. And then there's these columns and rows drop fields where I can drag a column here and actually see it start to be visualized. So I'll rewind us back to 2018 when the family that I shared a photo of a little bit earlier on the screen that I need to tote around in some sort of vehicle. I was trying to find a used minivan. So there are lots of ways to explore data to try to find something that you're looking for. In this case, I was trying to optimize, as we might say, as in the analytics community, the relationship between like trying to get like sort of the best value for that vehicle that I could based on some criteria. So I had a credit union that made some car listings available on their website. And so, okay, I was going to grab this data and just bring it into to the data set here. So if I drag, just as an example, I think measure values will do this into the view. No, it's going to be very messy. If I drag the number of records into the view here, that's what I want. You can see here, and again, apologies for the font size. Let's do a couple of things to make this much larger. You can see this data that I'm looking at has 182 cars listed in the data set. Just to make this a lot easier to view, I'm going to change the font size for the entire workbook here, and I'm going to crank this up. So on the format workbook sidebar that shows up when I click on format workbook, I can change this font size to, let's make this something like 16. Okay, and you can see the 182 there. So this data set that I have has 182 vehicles listed in it. I'm only focused on Honda Odysseys. There were more, but I had a particular preference for that type of vehicle. And so now what I'd like to do is get a better understanding of like, okay, well, what kinds of cars are there? You can see I've given myself a little homework assignment in each of the title bars of the screen. So this is like a little pre-set up template here that I've got. And so what I'm going to try to do to understand this 182 a little bit better is show the count of cars by year. I have a year field over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to take that and drag that over to the columns drop field right there. And you can see I get a population of years for cars that are in the data set. And I'm going to take the number of records and drag that into the rows here. And what that's going to do is give me a visualization of like how many cars do we have for each model year in this data set. I don't tend to like looking at data that's not continuous in a line chart. So I'm going to change that to a bar chart. So I can go to the Show Me tab in Tableau here. And it's not letting me do a bar chart unless I make my years discrete rather than continuous. So in Tableau, a discrete measure is something that like you want to group by, and continuous means you can sort of slice it infinitely, like time, right? You can go from like year to quarter to month to week to day to hour to minute to second. That's what a continuous variable would be. Since I'm just looking at it from a year-to-year basis, I'm going to go with discrete, and you can see it relatively intelligently selects like, oh, you want to see a bar chart then, which is exactly what I want. I can click on the top here and go from standard to entire view, which is when I'm working with data, what I tend to like to do. I'm in my mid-40s, so my eyes are aging, and I tend to like to see things as big as possible. So great, now I can understand for the 182 cars that are in this data set, which models are represented here, and most of them are coming off of lease, and so that's partly why they're available for sale. And you can see when I did this analysis in 2018, 3-year leases were quite common, and that's why you see majority represented here in 2015 and 2014. Super. So if I go to my finish line, yep, it's the same data set. Great. So now what I'd like to do is start to look at a relationship, right? I mentioned I wanted to try to optimize what I was looking for in a car. I didn't want to spend too much relative to its value. So what I'm going to do here is look at the relationship of two variables. So this is going to be one of my favorite charts, a 2-axis bar and line chart. So you can see two things and how they relate to each other. And what I'm going to do for that is I've already got the number of cars in the view. If I click on the label here, I can actually add show mark labels, which is how you can add text to the bar charts there. And I'm going to drag in price. So here's price over here. And a way to see a 2-axis chart is to drag this all the way over here to the right, where you get this like dotted line, which is kind of like a pro move. It's not described too frequently in Tableau presentations, but it's again one of my kind of favorite approaches. Tableau is being a little silly with what it's offering me as default options here. So it's giving me this bubble chart, which is not very helpful. So I'm going to go back to the marks card here, change this particular view rather than having it be automatic, is say like, no, I want bars back here. And then for price, I'm going to go here and change this to line. It's also giving me you can tell by the numbers here, like I can guarantee you there's no used Honda Odyssey that's going for $2 million. So I can see that's actually the sum of the 82 cars. If I click the drop down here, I can change the calculation from sum to give me the average. And aha, like we find that, as would fit our intuition, cars that are more recently made are more expensive, and that price goes down the older the vehicle is. So that it's nice as an analyst to kind of see like this thing that I would expect kind of pops in the data and matches my intuition. One thing we're all very aware of is like when you kind of drive a car off of a new car lot, it plummets in value, right? Like you sort of like lose immediate sale value from a car just by putting a single mile on it. And you can kind of see that here, right? For the one vehicle here in 2017, you can see like a $12,000 difference between that vehicle and the next year older. So we're going to spend a little time with a different visualization, a scatter plot, to understand like, well, that's promising, right? Like I can see there's not, in my mind, a big difference between a car that was made in 2017 or 2016. So I kind of want to optimize around like, how can I spend a little bit less but still get a car that's just as good or pretty close to just as good as 2017. So there we go, there's our finished view. So scatter plot. So different than a bar and line chart, what we're going to do is look at the cars as individual vehicles on what's sometimes referred to as a 2x2. So what I'm going to do here is drag again what are referred to as axes in the view. So I'm going to go to, for example, I want to see mileage along the bottom, so I'm going to drag that to my columns. I'm going to tell Tableau I'm not interested in the sum of the mileage. I'm interested in this as a dimension. So I want to slice this data or view it through the lens of mileage. And so there we go. And so you can see all these like little hash marks now are representing individual cars. Let's spread this data out vertically by price and start to see what the individual vehicles would look like when I compare them that way. So again, this is looking at sum. So I'm going to remind Tableau I care about just the individual cars as a dimension, and there's our scatter plot, right? So you can kind of see like there are cars here that are all the way out here for 123,000 miles. You can get a car for $48.95, and then all the way up here and to the left, probably that one car that we saw, right, that was made in 2017, only has 562 miles on it and is indeed $39,000. So somewhere in between is where I'm interested in actually buying a car. So this is helpful to start to see, okay, like I can see kind of like what the spread of my options are. So there's my scatter plot by mileage and price. And in general, the more mileage a car has, the less expensive it is. But you can see there's sort of like this like vertical variation here, right? Like even just these cars right here differ in price by like $15,000, even though they've got basically the same mileage on them. So I want to understand that a little bit better. So let's do this. Let's start to look at a calculated field I'm going to call miles per year. So I promised this a little bit earlier to say for metrics that you want to calculate, like a formula in Excel, I've actually already calculated this. I'm just going to have a little calculated field called divide my mileage by the age of the car. So that's going to give me how many miles per year the car has on it. And I'm going to drop that on the size part of the card here, which means these bubbles are going to change in size. They're a little hard to see, so I'm going to switch this from a circle to or from a ring to a circle. And so now I can kind of see like, oh, okay. There are some cars that like relative to their age have had a lot of usage. Like this big bubble out here has had 33 miles per year put on it, which means the car is relatively young and has a lot of miles on it. Not kind of my ideal. This much smaller bubble has many fewer miles per year, 4,674, versus its age. And that's the kind of car I would like to drive, is something that has like a lot less use on it if I can. Going further a little bit, you can also ask Tableau to give you a trend line. So let me say, for example, like I'd like to know what the average miles are on these cars. You can add what's called a reference line in Tableau. I'm going to click this add reference line after I right-click the axis down here at the bottom. And that's going to give me this great card, which is going to let me choose between different ways to put a vertical line on this axis. I'm going to say I want the average miles. I could choose median, which is also a different way to define the middle, or a constant number if I wanted that. But I really just want the average mileage that's available in this view, and click OK. And it's going to plot a line there that I always like to format this. I always want to say like, okay, I actually want the label to say what it is. So I'm going to type average miles here, and then add the actual value, and then click that, and like there we go. The average miles here are 38,384 for all these vehicles. And I'm even going like a little bit further because I'm a data visualization nerd, and click here and just make sure that shows up at the top of the view. And then click I'm going to do the same thing on the y-axis here too. So add reference line. I want to see the average price for these vehicles. So again, I'm going to type average price and put the value in there, and then click OK. And I'd like to format this a little bit so it shows up on the right-hand side of the screen. So clicking this guy, and then instead of changing my vertical view, I'm going to change the horizontal view. So there we go. So an average of these 182 cars, an average car within this data set costs about $23,000 and has about 38,000 miles on it. Okay, super. It's always helpful to kind of know sort of what we're dealing with. And you can see there's a lot of variation between the number of miles and the amount of price in the vertical. One more thing I'm going to add here too is in this analytics tab. So this analytics tab lets you do lots of fun stuff. one of the things that I do very frequently is I'll look at a trend line, especially for something like a scatter plot. And I'm going to click on this guy and drag it over as if I was dragging mileage or price. And I'm going to drag this onto the linear option here, and that's going to draw a line through my data set. So again, as mileage increases, price decreases. And if I mouse over this and just kind of click this guy, just for the statistics nerds who may be within this community, I can see, for example, on average for these Honda Odysseys, each incremental mile subtracts 17 cents from the price. So like you can kind of do that quick math to figure out, okay, what should a car roughly be worth? You can also see this R squared, which is how much of the price is explained by the mileage. You can see more than half of the price of the car is explained by the mileage, by that 0.61 or 61%, which means there's a very strong correlation between these two metrics and a p-value less than 0.001. Again, for my stats nerds friends, that means there's a very strong and significant relationship between those metrics. So okay, great. Like that's a good way to reason about the value of these cars. So go to my next tab here, and then what I'd like to do now is like, I mean, I could poll the audience, but I'll just shortcut the answer in the interest of time, to say like, what do you think like might be a differentiator in terms of price of the car? If you don't know about Honda Odysseys, like there's different, they call them trim lines. So like there's like your very, very basic bare bones vehicle, and then there's like all these like extra packages that you can kind of get for a given vehicle. And touring, I think, is the very top. I did not get a touring vehicle, and you'll see why in a minute. And I think LE is the bare bones version. So what I'm going to do is say, okay, my guess is this price differs not just by the mileage, but also by the kind of extra features that come with a given trim line. So what I'll do here is go to trim, which is a field that I've got in my data set as well. And I'm going to drag that onto color. And it's going to make this data set very complicated, but we'll walk it through. So boom, we've got now color in the scatter plot, which is very noisy looking. So what I'm going to do here is go over to this side of the panel where like now my trim options are available on the right. So I mentioned touring. I mentioned touring elite, which again sounds super fancy. For 2018, I'm sure it had something magical like Bluetooth in it. And LX is here at the bare bones level. So I misquoted before and said LE, it's LX. But if I click on one of these guys, I've got this like highlight selected items toggle enabled, which means when I click on this, it's only going to highlight the cars that match that touring elite trim. So you can see a couple nice things happened. One, my average mileage shifted. So I can see of the cars in this data set, hit 38,384 miles on them. The ones that are only this touring elite trim line have 30,800 miles. So there's fewer miles on them. And you can see they sort of visually cluster up and to the left as well. That also means the price is higher, right? So we saw in the previous view, the average price of these cars was $23,768. These cars are more expensive at $29,000. And one thing I actually was pleased to discover, it sort of validated my intuition again when I was looking for a car, is you can see how steep that purple line is, let's say when we compare it to the red line, right? Which means its value is going down faster. And if I mouse over, I mentioned for every mile you put on a car, you lose about 17 cents of its value. For touring elite, you lose about 21 cents of its value for every mile you put on the car. And so that sort of stands to reason, right? Like these like packages that you get with like media and entertainment and stuff like that, they charge you a lot when you buy them off of the new car lot, and indeed even when the car is used, but they lose their value very, very quickly. Like once you get up to a car that's like 60, 70, 80,000 miles, they kind of all start to look the same no matter what those packages are worth. So something to keep in mind in terms of shopping. So touring a little bit lower in value, EXL, which is obviously the majority of the cars we've got in this data. SE, which is kind of an outlier, EX and LX, and then I've got a category for some other cars here. a nice thing about this visualization too, if I come back to my EXL cars, is that you can see like there's a trend line. There's this big turquoise line that that goes through through the cars that shows me, and for EXL the price difference is yeah, it matches the average 17 cents. You lose 17 cents per mile. But another thing about it, just kind of from a visualization standpoint, is it gives you a baseline to compare relative value. So for EXL cars, given the mileage that they have, you can see there are some cars that are more expensive than average, which is above the line. So this guy is an EXL with 29,000 and change miles on it at 14,920. That's way above the average. You could pay for roughly the same mileage $25,000 instead of 30. So there's a big $5,000 difference in the price of those cars, which I can't do the math in my head. It's like 18% or something. So I mentioned like my desire to kind of like optimize, like try to find like the best value for the money that I had. This now starts to get me around a picture around like, okay, like I can see which of the cars in this data set have value relative to their mileage. I can see which are more or less expensive relative to other cars of the same type along mileage and trim line. And then I can start to make some decisions around like, oh, okay, I think I might want to get in touch with the dealer of some of these cars because they were available at different dealerships. So that's my visualization there. So if I'm ready to, there's a line from a movie, Glengarry Glen Ross, a man doesn't walk on the lot lest he wants to buy. So once I'm sort of like at the point where I'm like, yeah, I think I'm ready to start to make a decision, I want to start like calling some dealerships and say, hey, this car that's got 73,000 miles on it, like is a really good deal at $12,000. Let me contact that guy. There are other elements that you can bring into your Tableau visualization to kind of give you some more detail. So that's the tooltip mark over here. And I'm going to drag things like year on top of here, and let's say, oh gosh, the dealership that it's available, and I have location in here as well. And so now if I drag those different fields onto the tooltip, I can actually like mouse over one of these cars here and zoom in on it and say, okay, this particular car, I don't know if anybody from the call knows where Hackettstown is. It's about an hour west of here. Is available at Honda of Hackettstown, which is about 33 miles from where I live in Bloomfield, and is a 2010 vehicle. So one thing that I realized now is like, oh, okay, like one of the reasons that this is so much less expensive relative to other EXL cars is like it's actually quite a few years older, right? Like a 2010 versus say a car that's newer would have higher value, but also fewer miles as well. So I can start to make that decision of like, do I really want to look at a 2010 car? It looks like it's been treated reasonably well at 10,000 miles per year. On average, cars are driven about 10 to 12,000 miles per year. So I can make a decision around like, do I want to get in touch with that car, with that dealer, or maybe I want to compare that to something of similar mileage. Like here, I could say this one's also at Honda of Hackettstown. It's more expensive. It's a couple years younger, but has roughly the same kind of mileage on it. So I can start to think about, is that a car that I want to dig into? This gets me to the kind of conclusion of the lab portion of the presentation, and like we walked through a handful of things, right? From looking at sort of how does Tableau work in terms of like playing with getting data into a visualization. We started with a simple bar chart and added to that a relationship with a second variable. And then we started playing with this with a scatter plot, just simply plotting the cars, getting a little more detail about miles per year, adding a trend line, breaking that trend line out by different car types, and then finally adding some more detail so I could start to make a decision there. This is, will probably not surprise anybody. This is what I do on a day-to-day basis. So like how I look at customer behavior and think about different offers we make to customers or different titles that they might listen to. But it just genuinely happened to be a way that I made a car buying decision back in 2018. That today is the vehicle I'm toting my family around in. So let me pause, see if there's any thoughts, questions, ideas. I'm happy to answer broad questions about data science in general or Audible, or specifically about Tableau.
What vehicle did you end up buying, Ken?
I ended up getting a Honda Odyssey EXL, and I think the model number is 2015.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's aging now. I just realized today, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's almost a 10-year-old car.
Very cool. That was awesome. We will go and check the Slido. We have a few questions. If you do have anyone who joined late, there's a link in the chat. You can click it. The passcode is 2024. Go ahead and just post your question there, and we'll get to it. Starting off with the easy, straightforward ones first. Are there any free online tutorials for Tableau and a free license, which I believe you referenced a little bit at the beginning?
I did. So there's so many things available in YouTube. There are some great YouTube demos of how to use Tableau, and just simply like searching in YouTube for Tableau will give you a lot of things. Every once in a while, I will run into a sticky problem and not really know how to solve it, and so I will look for tutorials having to do with that specific problem. But even like intermediate, beginner, advanced, any of those types of tutorials are available on YouTube, and that's a good resource. In terms of like licensing, it is a pricey tool. Like it's available for enterprises. I think they charge per seat per year, which is why I recommend the public version of Tableau. The trade-off to make there though is like anything that you save in Tableau Public will be posted on a public web server. So I would be, totally comfortable posting something like this on Tableau server because there's no like private information to me. But if there were things that like, were very specific to, or even some of the data sets that I had shared earlier from Data is Plural would be totally fine. But if I was working with like my own private finance information or something like that, like I wouldn't post on Tableau Public.
Very cool. And just a quick follow-up to that, are there any like YouTubers in the Tableau community that you would recommend?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think it as homework though.
Cool. Awesome. All right, next question we have is where can I find data sets to start playing around with Tableau? Again, you mentioned that website at the beginning. I'm trying to remember is it data for all or something like that? It's a very democratic kind of.
Yeah, data is plural.
Plural.
And I have used this very frequently, even as recently as my 16-year-old daughter is starting to think about college, and so like I was curious to say like, are there any publicly available data sets for college, like what major she wants to enter into, financial aid, those kinds of things, and I went straight to Data is Plural. It's a great resource.
Very cool. Let's see, quite a few questions coming in. This is a good one. What would you suggest if someone wants to change their career to data science? Should they take college courses? Should they learn Tableau? Like, what would you say is the path for somebody who's interested in getting into this?
That's a great question. I'm bringing the quantitative spectrum slide back up on the screen here. This happened to be my career path. It was computer science to business analyst, which was sort of like project management, almost like I could have followed a TPM path and nearly did here at Audible before moving into data science. You can see there's a little bit of finance in there as well from the FP&A analyst, the first job that I had here at Audible. And so there are a multitude of paths to the data science job family. Some of the tools, like if you were engineering inclined, I'll bring up the slide I had here with the different tools that are available in the marketplace. Here we go. So if you're engineering inclined and like to code and explore data with open source tools, like Python is really widely available. A lot of my machine learning engineering colleagues who write really complicated models for identifying customers' interests and tastes and recommending titles to them, write in Python. So certificate courses, graduate degree, those kinds of like things will help kind of certainly drive forward a career towards data science. But even casual interests, like there's like Python and D3 and R all have like amazing communities for folks who are casually interested in data science and can get involved quickly. There's a great blog on Medium called Towards Data Science, which also offers a lot of resources as well. but I'd also suggest, talking to people that in the industry. Like if there's like, having a connection with Audible, happy to connect with somebody within the community or within the company who are interested in pursuing a data science career, because like a lot of those things can turn into like internships or fun side projects or side ships in some cases. So I would definitely recommend like connecting with folks within like LinkedIn or your kind of social network community if you're interested in pursuing a data science career as well.
Awesome. There was a question here that would be kind of interesting, maybe to go back to the lab piece, but maybe just to get a couple of the last quick ones out of the way. How does one go about exporting Tableau data into QuickSight?
Oh, that's
doable?
I actually don't know. I presume so. But what I've shared today is a visualization on top of a core data set that is in here. So a nice aspect of Tableau I didn't touch on because it's a little dive deep is like you can literally just paste data into Tableau and it'll simply interpret it. So for the nerds among us, like I wrote some JavaScript code to scrape a website and then just put it all into the clipboard, and I just went to Tableau and hit Command V. So if you're working with Tableau and a data set, it's probably like a CSV file or Excel file or something on your hard drive. And so you can absolutely bring that into QuickSight as well.
And then is there any limitation to the volume of data that Tableau can handle?
That's a really good question. So I mentioned millions and millions of customers and records, and I obviously work with a very, very simple data set of 182 today. In like real world terms, like I have thrown our customer visit data, which is like she visits a website or opens the app and goes page by page through a product experience at Tableau, and over some window of time, like you can just imagine like I myself have probably been to the site like 4 or 5 times today alone. So multiply that times a lot of people and a lot of days. So hundreds of millions of records. Like Tableau is pretty good at like being able to like drawing out like the kinds of visualizations that I was sharing here on the screen. Once you get into, let's say, a record set that's billions of rows, like you may want to be selective in terms of like, well, maybe I don't need like raw data. Maybe it's okay if I like aggregate this a little bit. Like I don't need like the specific car at the specific price. Maybe I can just calculate the average price of all of the cars or the number of them, that kind of thing. So aggregate is a term that we'll use with writing SQL to clump data into segments, and then you can start to examine the data from that perspective.
So I can ask a quick informal question.
Yeah, please.
So does Tableau know how to statistically sample large data sets so you don't have to do it yourself?
Good question. I'd say you probably would want to do that by hand. And gosh, I just the other day, again for us, for those of us who are like more nerdily inclined, I spend some time on Mastodon as my favorite social media network. I encountered somebody just the other day who does this for a living. He's a sociology professor at Duke University, and he prefers like using like he had like a little snippet of code that was like from the Unix terminal, and it's basically like tail. Like you can just like grab like X% of your record set and it'll randomly sample. So Leonid, I could share that with you if you're interested. But no, Tableau won't sample your data for you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So this is the lab question. Is there any way to quantify which particular car in your example is the best deal, other than just visually and kind of scanning through?
Yeah, good question. So if I were so inclined, I could probably come up with well, I guess a couple of things. So one thing that came to mind when we were looking at this is when I took the trends line and put it through the data. I had mentioned before, like that trend line explains that R squared, right? Explains 61% of the value of the car. When I looked at it again by, let's say for just EXL, by trim line, that relationship got a lot stronger. Like now it explains 82%. So like, between the trim line and the mileage on the car, you can predict with 82% accuracy what the price of the car is going to be. And so, our colleagues I mentioned in the machine learning world will actually generate these kinds of scores to be able to determine like what's the best recommendation to give a customer. Like I could come up with a calculated field that would use similar concepts to score each of the vehicles and say like what's truly the best value. Those types of things can also be very susceptible to outliers. So like this car, like way up here, like this, which I mentioned before, it is the Touring lead. It's actually 2016, not 2017. Only has some, actually I think there's one with even fewer miles. That's the one, with 562 miles on it. Those things can often, like outliers can often like throw off those kinds of scoring techniques. There are ways statistically to deal with them and from a machine learning standpoint to deal with them. So my coming up with like sort of a naive calculation would be fine. For my purposes, it was enough to look visually. Like I had a budget and I was able to say, okay, this is how much the maximum number of miles I want on the car and just go from there.
I mean, I don't think any event on tech would be complete these days if we didn't talk about generative AI. So it does Tableau or will Tableau use generative AI?
As far as I know, they got purchased by Salesforce, about 5-6 years ago, and I'll share again for the tech folks among us that the velocity of features that have come out for Tableau has been very slow since the acquisition. And so on one hand, like I have certainly seen on Tableau's site that they're working on generative AI features. I don't think they're moving at the same velocity as say QuickSight. And I've seen examples on QuickSight where like everything I just did, which was kind of like a nice kind of storytelling flow, right? Let's all take this with a grain of salt because we know how badly AI can fall over, especially Gen AI. But like I have seen a demo of like a QuickSight, what do they call it? Like profile or portfolio or something like that. That would just like you could ask it an open-ended text question and it'll just give you an analysis with like paragraphs and relevant visualizations and things like that. I'm close enough to data to be super skeptical of like that being reality for like for my job to be completely replaceable for a little while at least. But is Tableau going to be capable of Gen AI capabilities? I think so, but Power BI and QuickSight will probably move faster there.
Cool. And then just a quick plug, we have an upcoming event on the April 30th where we'll actually be covering this exact topic on generative AI. So for everyone on the call,
nice segue.
tell your parents, your friends, your grandma. And then last question that we have is, could you please explain the main differences between Tableau and QuickSight and provide insight into the criteria one should consider when choosing between them?
Yeah, I'll give like the simple or simplistic answer, which is Tableau. I think they built it as sort of a desktop first application. So I will confess, when I was first exposed to Tableau, I didn't really get it. Like I used it as a data tool, but it took witnessing a colleague of mine doing what I described as like dragging and dropping data in and just starting to get into the flow of doing the visualizations that I just demonstrated before it really clicked for me. And then I realized like, oh, this tool is like really great for like, I have a data set, I'm trying to figure out what it looks like, I'm trying to tell stories with it and help people get to make decisions. So they're very desktop first in that way. Like you have the application and you can do that. QuickSight by contrast is very server oriented. So like you've got let's say an enterprise, it could be a very small business, and you're piping data to QuickSight on the server side to be able to develop things like dashboards that are automated reporting tools. So it's a little more skewing to sort of what I would call BI engineering, like just building those kind of dashboards. They both have those use cases. Like Tableau can also build dashboards for it and deploy it to a server. QuickSight, you can also do like bespoke insights on the fly. But in my mind, like I've tried to use QuickSight to do what I do in Tableau, and there's a lot more friction in the process of trying to get to those insights very quickly, and it's just the design of the tool.
Very cool. We have 6 minutes left. Are there any other questions for Mr. Ken Walker? That was great. I learned a lot.
Oh, thanks. Glad to hear it.
Well, if not, then thank you everyone for joining. This was wonderful. We have another event coming up on the 26th of this month. Again, it's the monthly series. We'll be talking about the role of technical program managers on the 26th with Beth Zellen and Paul Dobek, who are two senior TPMs here. So please join for that. We would also love it if you could follow the link in the chat to fill out the post-event survey. Passcode's 2024. It's like 4 questions, but they're really important. They really help us figure out, how well we did with this presentation, whether you liked it, whether you hated it, what you'd like us to cover in the future. And we would just love that. Is there anything else, Doug?
Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you all very much for attending. Really appreciate it and appreciate the engagement. It's super awesome. Definitely interested in folks' feedback and look forward to seeing you in the next one.
Darren, any last words for?
No, I just want to, I'm not a data number person, but Ken, you blew it like out of the ballpark. And so my head's about to explode, like in a great way. And there was a woman by the name of Mary Curry. She joined, she's a VP of Communications and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Newark Regional Business Partnership. She was able to sign on, but on her part, she had a problem with her video. But she was elated that she can watch, like after we wrap this, she could watch it later. So that's the benefit of being able to record them and store them so that folks, if they missed it, they could see it if they have a technical issue. But you guys are terrific. And I don't think, Ken, a lot of people are going to get to your ability of knowledge where you can just say, oh, I'm looking for a car. So let me just like put that Tableau and just like put together a few things. But seriously, that's why this collaboration between the Urban League Tech House and Audible is so important to kind of bring this information to folks who would not otherwise get it. So we're looking forward with great excitement to the next presentation. And thank you, Audible family. I appreciate you.
Of course, always. Thank you so much, Darren,
Thank
for
you.
letting us partner with you on this. And we'll see everyone next time.
Okay. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.